Hey, good afternoon, Element Church. This is Corey Lambert, your Community Engagement Coordinator. I just wanted to spend a few minutes with everyone this afternoon to take a uh, look at Pastor Nathan's message from this past weekend. Hopefully, everybody has had a chance to see it or at least hear it. But in case you haven't, there may be a few spoiler alerts here for you. I can tell you it was a fantastic message from Pastor Nathan, just talking about how life is like a boombox. And continuing on with the summer playlist series. And this past weekend, he really focused on pressing that play button, as he put it, using the life of the Apostle Paul, formerly known as Saul, as his illustration as well. And taking a look at a few words in Scripture from the book of Acts to kind of point out a couple of key areas within Saul's life that really helps illustrate the point. So to start with, we were looking at the book of Acts in chapter 9, when Saul really at this point was still a persecutor of Christians. That was his MO. Like, people didn't really know him personally, but they had certainly heard of him. So his reputation definitely preceded him. All throughout the land, people knew that Saul was just a great persecutor of Christians, was relentless in his acts. But it was at this point when he was on the road to Damascus that the Lord actually spoke to him directly, just asking him, Saul, what are you doing to me? Now, Saul, of course, is, kind of astonished at this point. I mean, Lord, who are you? Is his question. And, of course, the Lord tells him who he is. And then at that point, he blinds Saul as well, putting scales over his eyes. Many of you may have heard this story before, but for those of you who haven't, at this point, Saul is led the rest of the way to Damascus. And there he stays for a few days, 3 days actually. And another man by the name of Ananias is spoken to by the Lord as well. And now Ananias is a good, faithful Christian, and the Lord directs him to go to Damascus, seek out Saul, and heal him. So Ananias presses play. He goes to Damascus, he finds Saul, he heals him. Saul can see again, right? Now it's at this point that we start seeing a conversion in Saul. No longer is he wanting to persecute Christians, but rather he starts learning more and more about Christianity itself, even going to the point of beginning to preach and spread the gospel. Now, this is just really an astonishing move on his part. People are just in awe of what's going on here, because Saul was just known as the great persecutor, and now here he is on the complete opposite side of the fence preaching the gospel. So it's great. We're starting to see this conversion in Saul, and really at a certain point as well, his conversion is complete when he begins going by the name Paul. So Saul becomes Paul, and there is where we get the Apostle Paul from. So fast forwarding a little bit to Acts chapter 28. In this chapter, this is where the Apostle Paul he's captured, he's being held prisoner, and he's boarded onto a ship. Now, he really already knows what's about to happen, and he in fact tries to warn the captain that the ship is going to wreck and that they probably shouldn't leave the harbor if they, don't want to wreck the ship. Now, of course, there's no captain that's going to listen to a prisoner, so captain keeps on course, right? Well, lo and behold, they do end up getting shipwrecked, and they do survive. They land on the island of Malta. From there, they're all trying to survive at this point. They need to keep warm, so they're trying to build a fire, and the Apostle Paul is like, hey, yeah, let's get this fire going. So he's starting to collect wood as well, and it's at this point that he gets bitten by a viper. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I get bitten by a viper, I'm gonna be like, holy cow, that hurts. I'm out of here. But the Apostle Paul really just shook it off, just shook the viper off, threw it in the fire. So the viper's gone. He carries on about his business. Now, at this point, word starts to spread more and more about Paul and who he is and what he does. So he's invited to a gentleman's house by the name of Publius, who's a very prominent public figure here on the island of Malta. So Paul goes to meet Publius and partake in a feast. And really, Publius wants him to meet his father because his father has fallen ill. So at this point, Paul heals his father. Such an amazing feat there as well, but it doesn't stop there. There are others on the island, other inhabitants that are ill, that really need healing as well. And Paul just heals everybody. By the end of the story, everybody on the island of Malta is healed. And that's just such a fascinating story because it just ties into everything we're talking about this week, which is not only pressing play, but persevering through everything and anything that you may encounter as you're continuing to follow the Lord. There are certainly going to be times in our walk with the Lord, not just once, not just twice, but probably several times, where you're going to get tired. You're going to encounter exhaustion. But at that point, it's all about perseverance, right? Now, thinking about the story of the Apostle Paul and everything that he went through, it's amazing how he was able to keep going, and we know he was able to do this because of the power of the Lord. He continued following the Lord's direction, going where the Lord wanted him to go. Even if it was someplace where maybe Paul didn't really want to be, but there he was, and the Lord had brought him there. So he continued to persevere through everything. And so we were talking a bit about that this past weekend, and Pastor Nathan really shared a lot of great things to help us kind of overcome that exhaustion. What do we do when we become to get exhausted as we're, exercising? A lot of people listen to music, several different genres of music that kind of help us to power through exercise, whether it's heavy metal, maybe some pop music, whatever you like to hear. But either way, there's that song or a few songs out there that just kind of get you going. They elevate your mood. So mentally, it helps you overcome the physical exhaustion, right? And helps you keep going so you can achieve more. And that's really where we ended the message, is how do we do that in our Christian life? And Pastor Nathan shared that Scripture, Scripture is the power track to our faith. And whenever you do find yourself becoming tired, turn to Scripture. Let's take a look at the stories that other people in the Bible have gone through, and from there we can gain some encouragement. We can perhaps gain some clarity, and continue to really persevere in our own walk with the Lord. And from there, you too can overcome. So Pastor Nathan said, this profound statement, and I really believe it too, that we have so much more in us than we realize. And the Lord knows what we're capable of. He wants nothing more than to see us achieve the greatness that he built into us. We're always going to have people rooting against us. That will always be. But, really, it's all about what we do to keep going. So what are we going to do to keep going? What are we going to do to continue pushing through? Even now, it's a very strange season we find ourselves in, but we're continuing to overcome and persevere through it all. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, if you haven't heard Pastor Nathan's message from this weekend, I highly recommend you take a look at that, watch it. It's a great message. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. In the meantime, God bless.